Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of the podcast. We've got a pretty fun episode today. I don't think we've recorded since the NFL drafts. We'll be talking about that a little bit. We're also going to go over the NBA playoffs. Of course, we are down to 4 in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals. We're going to talk a little bit about the NBA offseason, the MLB season, and then we're going to be introducing a new segment for the end of the episode. As always, of course, I'm joined by Nick and Ader, if you want to say hi.
Hello, everyone. It has been a fantastic month for Phillies baseball.
It sure has. So with that, we're not going to waste any time, and we will get started. So we'll start things off by giving some winners and losers to the NFL draft. Obviously, I've already put out a whole grades video, so if you want more detail, I recommend you check that out. But I do want to run through some of the notable stuff I had, and we will start with some of the winners I had that I didn't necessarily agree with consensus, which is why I picked them here. The Cincinnati Bengals, I thought, did really well. Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, is a guy who I was really high on. I think he was my second-ranked tackle in the entire class. I liked Chris Jenkins, and Jermaine Burton's a solid group of Day 2 guys, and I thought they did pretty well on Day 3 as well. I thought the Seattle Seahawks did really well. Byron Murphy in the first round I thought was a really good pick. Christian Haynes in round 3 was really solid. And I thought they had a pretty good Day 3 as well. I'm intrigued by the developmental Auburn corners they drafted with Nehemiah Pritchett and DJ James. And then the Kansas City Chiefs are another team who I thought did really well. I'm really high on Xavier Worthy. I've really talked myself into him over the last couple of months. And sure, there are some questions with him, but I really feel like if he ran a tenth of a second slower in the 40-yard dash, the draft community would be higher on him because the track record of players who have run sub-4 threes, especially at wide receiver, really haven't panned out in the NFL, but none of those guys have had the production that Xavier Worthy has had over his collegiate career. And I think pretty early on he's going to become the best receiver on this team, whether Rashee Rice is on it or not. I do want to go over some losers, but I also want to talk about some other teams in the middle. And I feel like I have to start with my team, the Lions, because last year everybody thought our draft stunk, and I said no. I thought our draft was pretty good. I disagreed with consensus, and I think I was right, although I couldn't have expected it to be this good. This year it's kind of the opposite. Everybody's saying that we did really well, and I don't know if I entirely see it. I thought the Lions made a great move in the first round, trading up for Terrion Arnold, but the rest of the class, in my opinion, was a little bit lackluster. I'm not as high on Ennis Rakestraw, and I don't love the asset management from Brad Holmes. The constant trading up, trading away a third-round pick next year. I get that he has his guys that he likes, which is a good thing, but I think always moving up for them probably isn't the most sustainable route to go. I feel like Brad Holmes was very, I don't want to say cocky or arrogant, because I feel like those have a negative connotation, but I feel like he went into this draft really confident, like this is his heat check shot, and sure, he's earned it with the way he's built this team over the last 3 years, but it's a risky strategy, and I'm not sure if it's going to work. I also want to look at Denver and Minnesota. They obviously made some big moves at quarterback. Minnesota did not have to move up as high as I thought they would for J.J. McCarthy, so that is a huge win, but then they used all those assets that they were able to hold on to trade up for Dallas Turner. And in a vacuum, I don't think it's a bad move. Dallas Turner's a great player and should be a really good addition to this defense. But over the last few years, it's become pretty apparent to me that their general manager, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, really has no idea how to manage his assets. The Vikings only have 3 draft picks next year, only one of which comes before the 5th round. They should be getting some compensatory picks with Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter gone, but with some of the other players they signed, they're not going to get as good of comp picks as they would have otherwise. So I feel like they have really fumbled a good group of draft picks that they could have had. I also want to look at the Denver Broncos. Everybody's giving them a low grade, and I disagree. I'm high on Bo Nix. I see a path for him to becoming a good NFL quarterback, and it certainly doesn't hurt that he'll be with Sean Payton and his number 1 receiver in college, Troy Franklin. And I also thought the rest of their draft was really good. Jonah Ellis is a good player. Chris Abrams-Drain, I thought, is pretty solid. I don't think he's that much worse than his Missouri counterpart, Ennis Rakestraw, who went 3 rounds earlier. As for some losers, we'll start with Jacksonville. They killed it on day 1, fleecing the Minnesota Vikings, as I mentioned, with Dallas Turner, and then picking Brian Thomas Jr., which is a great pick. The problem is the rest of their draft was really bad, in my opinion. Another Trent Baalke disaster class. Everybody's given the Rams really high grades. I don't really see it. The Jared Verse pick in the first round is fine, but I don't, love it. Moving up for Braden Fisk in the second round, I'm really not a fan of. They only traded up 13 spots, and they gave up a second rounder next year, which is far too steep, picking a guy who I didn't think should have gone that early. I thought the rest of their draft was okay. Blake Corum is fine. I think he's pretty similar to Kyron Williams, so I do like that dynamic. Cam Kitchens was fine, but the Braden Fisk move really left a bad taste in my mouth. The Ravens are another team who everyone's giving high grades to, and again, I don't really see it. The Ravens are a team who consistently has scored highly for me in the past, and they are one of the organizations who's probably earned the benefit of the doubt. But I'm not a huge fan of their draft. I'm not sold on Nate Wiggins. I see the upside with him, and I don't think the value is horrible or anything. But I had both Cooper DeJean and Kool-Aid McKinstry ranked higher than him, and I think both of those guys are a lot safer for a Ravens team who's probably looking for immediate production rather than a developmental guy. I thought the rest of their draft was also underwhelming. Roger Rosengarten in the second round was fine. And then after that, they picked a lot of guys who were viewed as consensus steals, like Adiza Isaac, Tez Walker, your guy, TJ Tampa. But all three of them I was lower on than consensus. I don't think any of those picks were crazy steals or anything. Maybe Tampa should have gone a little earlier, but I don't think any of those were great picks like everybody's making them out to be. And then, last but not least, we have to touch on Atlanta. I don't get what they're doing at all. They just signed Kirk Cousins to a huge contract, and Michael Penix Jr. is probably not going to play for 2 or 3 years. And if he does play sooner than that, that means the Kirk Cousins signing was a disaster. And just looking at this through the perspective of Atlanta's front office, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense for them when they should be contending in a bad NFC South division by adding a guy like Rome Odunze or a defensive piece. Either the Kirk Cousins signing flops and they probably get fired before Michael Penix really gets a chance, or Michael Penix sits for 4 years. He's 28 years old by the time he needs a second contract, and many NFL teams over the last 10 or 15 years have really taken advantage of their Super Bowl windows with having quarterbacks on rookie contracts. And Atlanta might not get that with Michael Penix if he is the guy, because he's going to sit for so long. I will say the one thing in defense of Atlanta is that I like Rook Oro more than most. I don't think they needed to trade up for him and give away a third, but I do like him more than everybody else. But still, I cannot get behind their decision to pick Penix at all.
There are 32 teams in the NFL draft. One of them has to be the best, and it's always going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't know what it is, but since Howie picked Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, he's been running circles around every team since then. The past 4 drafts, seemingly or so, he's been fantastic, and this one was no different. Instead of having to trade up 10 picks to go get what many consider to be the top corner, Quinion Mitchell, they just stayed put, and they got their guy. And then they followed it up with trading up to get Cooper DeJean in the second round, taking the second worst secondary and turning it into one with some of the most depth in the NFL. And you followed it up with guys with high upside like Jalen Hunt in the third round, and continuing with Aeneas Smith, Johnny Wilson, and a bunch of other guys that I am so excited to see for at least my team, because I'm biased as hell. But when you go into a draft and okay, I need corner, all right, let me go get 2 of some of the top 3 or 4 corners in this draft, and let's have some fun. So I think the Eagles did a fantastic job during this draft, moving up and down the board. I think they had the most trades during a draft in the past 20 years or so, which is kind of ridiculous. They had 8 or 9. They got more thirds next year, more fourths next year, more fifths next year. They were moving up and down the board, capitalizing on every asset they could, and Howie was just having a ball the entire draft. And I think every player we drafted is going to get some sort of playing time, whether as a rookie or in the following years. And there are a bunch of other teams that I think did great as well. I think the Bengals did a really good job, but the one thing, a few things I want to touch on is I want to bring up the Chargers. I think after they got rid of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, it was without a shadow of a doubt that they needed weapons. They needed a receiver. And day one, they sat and they took Joe on at pick 5. A lot of people, including myself, thought they might trade down, try to capitalize on some assets and rebuild this team, because it's not all that good right now. The defense is lackluster. You have no weapons. But they stayed put, and they decided to get Joel at 5. And I think Joel is a phenomenal player. He was my highest rated prospect in this draft, and I think he's going to be phenomenal day one. And I'm not against it, but going into day two, you need weapons. Your number one receiver was your first round pick last year, who didn't do all that much, and a bunch of career wide receiver threes. So then they come up and they get one of my guys, Lad McConkey, at 34, and I'm ecstatic for that pick. I think the Chargers did a great job being able to not just get Joel, who I have as my favorite prospect in this draft, but Lad McConkey, who I had as a top 5 receiver in this draft in the second round. So those 2 picks alone, I think, were phenomenal gets for the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. And then you followed it up with getting pieces for this defense that needs a lot of help. You get Junior Colson out of Michigan. You're getting Justin Adigaba and so many others. And you come out and you're like, okay, well, we're sitting receivers. Let's go out and let's get a few guys. You see Brennan Rice fall into the 7th round. Grab him. Grab one of Harbaugh's guys, Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan. And give Justin Herbert the best ability he can to come in and to be better. We saw them as a bottom 5 team last year, but the year before they made the playoffs. So we know that there is talent on this roster, that they can do what needs to be done. And Jim Harbaugh is a guy who I think is going to be able to rally this team. And if the defense can get up to standard, I think this team could be something next year. For another winner, I think the Steelers did a fantastic job. They've always had one of the better rosters on paper, but that O-line has been kind of miserable the past half a decade or so. So the Steelers came into this draft and they drafted 3 guys who could potentially start either this year or next year. Troy Vuitton in the first round is going to probably play left tackle for them, and he looks like he's going to be ridiculous. And in the second round, you get Zach Frazier, who's probably the second best center in this class behind JPJ. And Zach Frazier projected to be the starting center for the Steelers day one. So that's 2 starters on the offensive line that you're getting after drafting Broderick Jones last year in the first round. And then you get Mason McCormick in the 4th round, who seems to be a steal in the 4th round. He might be able to start day one, but realistically probably going to sit a little bit and start a year or 2 or now, maybe when Isaiah Malo's contract runs out. And besides just completely overhauling the offensive line, you get another day 2 receiver that the Steelers seemingly always get in Roman Wilson. So knowing the Steelers, he's going to be a Pro Bowler soon. So George Pickens, you traded Deontay Johnson, you need a receiver, boom, here's Roman Wilson to help you out. And then even with the injuries, getting Peyton Wilson is something the Steelers probably could have done in the second round without the injuries. They've always projected high with linebackers. They went up for Devin Bush in the top 10 a few years ago. So getting Peyton Wilson and trying to project on his high upside, and you're not going to only bank on him because you just got Patrick Queen. So if he pans out, that's 2 really good linebackers the Steelers are going to get. So I think being able to overhaul the offensive line, get another receiver for whoever the QB might be, and to get a high upside linebacker, I think is a phenomenal draft for the Steelers. And then for a team kind of in the middle, similar to the Lions, I have the Carolina Panthers. The entire offseason, they kind of made it known they want to make sure Bryce Young has everything he needs to succeed. They went out, they got Deontay Johnson. They were able to get some more help on the old line with Robert Hunt. And in the first round, they traded up into the first round. They drafted Xavier Legette. And I think Legette is a great player. And if he can kind of shore up his hands, I think he could be a phenomenal player in the NFL. And I think he could be a future wide receiver 1 if all things pan out. And if Dave Canales has anything to say about it, he's going to be phenomenal. In the second round, they go out. They get the first running back off the board with Jonathan Brooks. I've been saying he was going to be a Cowboy for a while. Carolina comes up, deals with him right out of their faces. And that's a new running back for Bryce Young to play with. You got Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, which at least as a rookie, letting Brooks come back from the ACL, that's going to be a nice tandem for Bryce Young to have some fun with. And in the 4th round, you get Javion Sanders, my tight end, who I thought could go in the 2nd round, falls to the 4th round. And that's going to be a really nice pass-catching tight end for Bryce Young to throw to. So they were able to come in and build around the offense. And my only main issue is, besides those 3 picks, the rest were kind of meh to me. They wanted to go out and get guys for the defense, which I think is what they really need badly, especially after guys like Jeremy Chin and Brian Burns has left. They pretty much need a lot of defensive help besides, say, Derek Brown. But they only had 4 other picks. They all went to the defense, which I like. But Michael Barrett in the 7th round isn't that bad of a pick. Trevin Wallace, another linebacker. But I just think they need some help on the defense, and I think they could have managed their assets a little better, trying to trade down, trade up, and whatnot, try to get more assets for the defense. But I think the upside they got for those offensive playmakers, it's going to help Bryce Young a lot, and I think they're going to be a lot better than people are going to think next year. In terms of losers, I'm going to start off with the Tennessee Titans, who might be the free agency winners of this past year, getting guys like Tony Pollard, Chidobe Awuzie, L'Jarius Sneed, and many others. But their first round seemingly went all right. You know, they drafted J.C. Latham, and they seemingly probably wanted Joe Alt as their first-round pick. Got taken, just took the next guy off their board, which was J.C. Latham. But the rest of the draft was all right to me. Devondre Sweat in early second round is a little high for me, especially after what might be a DUI for him. We'll have to see how that exactly pans out. But besides that, the rest of the draft just didn't hit home like I kind of wished it would. They didn't have a 3rd-round pick, and Cedric Gray in the 4th. Just trying to get help on the defense is something I'd like to see, but we'll have to see exactly how some of these draft picks pan out, because I don't think a lot of them are going to hit home. Hopefully, Devondre Sweat as a run defender is going to help alongside guys like Jeffrey Simmons, but we'll have to wait and see. I think one of the easier takes is to say the Cowboys had one of the weaker drafts. They had a later pick, and they had to sit and stick with Tyler Guyton after a lot of the other tackles got taken. They did trade down a bit. They traded down 5 spots, so they lost out on a few of the tackles, but it seems like they're confident with Tyler Guyton, and I think they would have wanted to get a running back in round 2 or 3, but they just seemingly they didn't draft a running back whatsoever. I think Nealon is a nice pick. For BB as a guard is a good pick, but everyone else they drafted just like they could have drafted a running back. This is one of the more deeper running back classes. They just didn't go after one, and instead they signed 30-year-old Ezekiel Elliott. That's making me question things. They helped the O-line, which is good, but even with a good O-line, you have no one really running the ball. Zeke and Rico Dowdle are not going to be it. If you're going to try out and win the division, try to get top 3 seed and try and go win a Super Bowl. And the last team I have for losers, I think, is more of my take. I think a lot of people think this team had a better draft. And that's going to be the Miami Dolphins. They lost a lot in the offseason. Mainly, they lost Christian Wilkins. They lost their other corner, whose name is escaping me right now. They lost their entire offensive line. They were able to re-sign Raheem Mostert, which is all right. And even though Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb are on IR already with torn Achilles, torn ACLs, drafting Chop Robinson at pick 21 seems like a meh pick to me. It's odd because once those two get healthy, assuming they come back as strong as ever, where does Chop Robinson kind of fall? Because do you plan on keeping Phillips? Do you plan on keeping Bradley Chubb? If you do, what becomes of Chop Robinson? You're going to have a lot of edge rushers, but to me, I thought they would have taken Johnny Newton in the first round. I thought he was going to go round 1. He'd be the replacement of Christian Wilkins, and they save money. And I thought that'd be a really good get for them. But they go outside, get an edge rusher, and to me, it's not the exact player you would have gotten, especially when you got a guy like Muhammad Kamara in the 5th round, who is not Chop Robinson, but I think he has a really high floor that he could be a really good rotational edge. But if you have Chop Robinson, he's going to end up playing the same role by the time Phillips and Chubb are back and healthy. And you followed up with Patrick Paul as a nice tackle, and I think that's a good pick for them. But besides that, I think Malik Washington is all right, but you have such a really good receiver unit. Is he even going to be able to get playing time? Taj Washington, again, another receiver. Do you really need receivers? Are you expecting Tyreek Hill to leave that quickly? And in the 4th round, Jalen Wright, love the player, and I guess he fits in the team, but you have Raheem Mostert, you have Devon Achane, and if Achane's as injury prone as he seems, he's going to be injured every year, and Raheem Mostert's 30, I guess it makes sense in the long-term aspect, but after you've lost so much this past offseason, I would think they would try to go after players who are going to contribute year 1 and try and come in and replace these guys. But you have Jalen Wright, who's going to start out as RB3, as your 3rd pick, and Chop Robinson's going to end up getting demoted surely by the time Chubb and Jalen Phillips comes back, he'll probably be edge 3 or edge 4, and everyone else is going to be backup seemingly fairly early. And I'm not a fan of them kind of getting backups and depth pieces when they need a lot of starters. They lost their corner too, and they just didn't draft a corner. They drafted a safety who seems all right, but it's a lot of meh picks to me, and I'm not a fan of what the Dolphins are able to do this year.
Okay, so with that, we will shift our attention over to the MLB season. We're nearing the 1/3 mark of the year, which means we can start to make some real conclusions and figure out which teams are legit and which teams are not. So being that we're at the end of May, we're 2 months into the Major League season, and there are some interesting takeaways. Looking back at our initial season predictions, I think there was stuff that we were both right on and some stuff that we were both wrong on. Cough, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Cough. So we'll start with what I feel like is a clear hierarchy, and I think there's a very clear 5 best teams in the league right now. In some order, it's the Dodgers, the Braves, the Phillies, the Yankees, and the Orioles. These 5 teams seem to be a clear cut above everybody else. I'm pretty sure they do have the 5 best records in the league. No, Cleveland and Kansas City are there. But in terms of overall talent, those feel like the 5 best teams. Those feel like the favorites for the World Series. And obviously, the MLB playoffs is a little bit different to, say, the NBA, to where any team can win once you get into the playoffs. But it feels like those 5 teams are definitely the teams to beat right now. They're in a really good spot. I imagine you'll want to talk about the Phillies a lot, so I'll let you have it that. But some interesting other storylines to point out. The AL Central has certainly been competitive. The Cleveland Guardians look legitimately quite good, as do the Kansas City Royals. I was not high on the Royals this year. I thought people were overhyping them, and I think it's fair to say I was wrong. I'm still not sold on the Royals making the playoffs, but the way they've performed, it's hard to look past them at this point, 13 games over 500. Minnesota looks quite strong as well. Those 3 teams are probably going to battle it out for that division, and it probably looks like too steep of a mountain for, say, a team like the Tigers to come back from, especially considering Detroit really has not played well as of recent. I did pick the Tigers to win the division at the beginning of the year, and I still feel like in hindsight that wasn't a horrible pick. I didn't expect Cleveland to be this good. I was wrong about Kansas City. But the idea with the Tigers is that the pitching staff is obviously tremendous, and if the offense can be league average, the Tigers can contend for the division. The problem is the offense has not been anywhere close to league average, with Spencer Torkelson really underperforming. Javier Baez has found a way to get worse. Certain guys like Colt Keith have played better, and Riley Green has been highly productive this year. Mark Hanna's been pretty good, but the offense as a whole just has not been it. I think the AL West has also been quite fascinating. I picked the Mariners to make it to the World Series this year. That doesn't necessarily mean I expect them to win 100 games and have the best record in the American League, but the fact that they've performed pretty well so far leading the AL West, I guess my pick is justified for now, even though their offense is not the best. The Rangers and Astros have certainly started off slow, but Houston's playing a lot better. I definitely expect them to get back in the mix for the wild card. I feel like I trust them a lot more than I do the Rangers, because Texas has only really been good for 1 year. But I think Texas has arguably the higher ceiling, because I think they have more high-end players on offense. And then pitching-wise, if Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer and Nathan Eovaldi are all able to come back healthy, then Texas is right back at the top of the American League of teams to beat. But if those guys don't get healthy, I figure that the Rangers could possibly miss the playoffs. In terms of the National League, again, there's a clear top 3. I feel even more confident in the NL than the AL, saying that one of these 3 teams is going to make the World Series and everybody else is just trailing behind. I do want to point out that Milwaukee has been quite good. We were both wrong about them. The Cubs look pretty solid as well. I still feel like the Cubs are probably the pick to win this division at this point, but the Brewers have certainly performed well. And then the wild card race seems to be quite interesting behind those guys. For that 3rd spot, the Padres, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, all certainly in the mix. Standings-wise, the Pirates are kind of there too. Maybe Paul Skeens is able to lead a revolt for Pittsburgh, but I'm not entirely sure it happens. So overall, I have a hard time thinking that this hierarchy of 5 is overtaken. If anybody does it, though, I'd look out in the AFC, wrong sport. The American League for one of Seattle, Houston, maybe Texas, maybe Cleveland.
Baseball is really weird in the first 2 months or so of the season. And there's a lot of storylines that I think we're going to see continue from where we're at. You mentioned the AL Central, and they are something. I was ever so close to picking the Guardians to win this division. I thought maybe the pitching would be up to standard, and as long as the bats continued, you see guys like Andres Gimenez come back after a disappointing year last year and play well, and you continue to see the good bats from J. Ram and Josh Naylor and others. And yeah, that's basically been happening. Andres Gimenez looks insane. J. Ram is him, and Josh Naylor hits bombs. So their pitching's been phenomenal, especially even after Shane Bieber went down. Shane Bieber in the first 2-3 starts or so looked phenomenal, and then he went down with Tommy John. So not so good for him, but the rest of the rotation for the Guardians has been really well. The Royals rotation has basically been carrying them, as well as Salvador Perez, who's still insane with his bat at 34 years old. You see on the Royals guys like Seth Lugo has a sub-2 ERA, looking for possibly to get a Cy Young. He's not going to win it, but it's really interesting to see the Royals get all these small signings in the offseason and all of them pan out very well. Bobby Witt is also him. The Twins have started off a bit slow, but I think they'll pick it up. We saw them win. I think they won 15 or so in a row for a while, but they've started to hit a slow streak. They're starting to lose distance between the Royals and the Guardians, but I think eventually those two teams will slow down a bit, and we'll see the Twins really fight for that division. The AL West is something that I think is really interesting. With the Mariners are currently in the lead with some of the worst hitting I've seen in my life. Out of all the starters, they have one guy that has above an 800 OPS, and it's not who you think it is. Not J-Ram. Julio has like a 650. The entire lineup has been horrid. It's just like how we both mentioned they have the best rotation in baseball. They have like 3 different Cy Young caliber players: George Kirby, Luis Castillo, Matt Brash is an insane closer. I love Brian Wu. This entire pitching staff is just absurd. It's just their bats are horrid. The Rangers have started really slow between injuries. The pitching's kind of not been good, especially with the loss of Jordan Montgomery. I got there. At some point later down the season, they'll get Jacob deGrom. As long as he stays healthy, I think they'll be fine. As long as they can keep it up and kind of just get a little stronger. As long as they make the playoffs, I think they can keep a prime Jacob deGrom. I think they'll be all right. And the Astros had one of the worst starts to a season I've seen in a while. They were last in the division by a good margin. But lately, they've been kind of insane. They've won, like, they're 7-3 in the last 10. I think they've won, like, 10, maybe up to, like, 15 of the last 20 or 25 or so. They've been absurd the past month and a half of baseball. And they're definitely climbing back. And it kind of sucks that the Rangers and Mariners also started kind of meh to the season, because they could have definitely just destroyed the Astros' chances of ever winning the division. And now they're only 4.5 games back, and since it's May, any of those teams can win. The A's started really hot. Mason Miller is ridiculous, but besides that, they kind of suck. In the AL East, it's a fight between the Yankees and the Orioles. The Red Sox started really hot. Their rotation's been phenomenal, but they don't have the bats. They're going to slow down eventually. The Rays are 500 or so. And the Blue Jays, I think, are going to be a very interesting storyline throughout the rest of the year, with a lot of rumors saying they might try to move on from Bo Bichette or Vladimir Guerrero Jr., or even both, with them being free agents either, I think, this season or next season. With how disappointing they've been the past few years, they're under 500 right now. They might want to cut ties, sell high, and just get assets and try and rebuild from what they're at right now, because Vladdy hasn't really been all that good. Bo Bichette has a sub 600 OPS right now. Both of them have kind of been disappointing to start the year. So if they can get some good prospects for both of them, I wouldn't be shocked if they go out and send them on their way. The NL West has been interesting. Going into the year, it was the Dodgers division to win, and they're going to win it. And the rest of the division has been interesting. The Padres rotation has been better than most people would have thought. Dylan Cease looks like he's the good version of Dylan Cease that we're getting. But the rotation is really bad. Manny Machado kind of sucks. Ha-Seong Kim doesn't look like himself. They traded for Luis Ariz, which is very interesting. He's going to be hitting 330 or so. But I don't think it's going to be enough to even win the division. They'll try and go for a wild card. The Giants are sitting at 500. The Diamondbacks are just shy of it. So between the three teams, the Padres, Giants, D-backs, they're all kind of going to fight for 2, 3, 4 in that division, with the Rockies being the Rockies. The NL Central, I think, is going to be a bloodbath. This division could mirror itself by the end of the year, and I wouldn't be shocked at it whatsoever, just because of how weird this division is. The Cardinals were like 0-10 or something at one point, and then they're 8-2 in the last 10. So they're a very flip-floppy team, with Paul Goldschmidt looking like he doesn't know how to swing a bat. The Brewers are playing well. I don't know if it'll last, because I'm still very low on them, but who knows. The Reds, they have a guy named Ellie De La Cruz, who has like 35 stolen bases in a month and a half. So that's ridiculous, and his bat is good again. So you got Paul Skeens and the Pirates, and the coach of this guy, Shota Imanaga, he is ridiculous. I think as of the last I looked, he has a .08 ERA, and in 9 starts, the lowest in however long, and he's a 30-year-old rookie from Japan. So it's very interesting to see how the Cubs are going to manage the rotation. And as long as their bats stay healthy, I think they should be the favorite to win this division. And I said the NL East for last because I have an agenda to make, and that's the Phillies are going to win the division, because I don't care. We have a 6-game lead over the Braves, and I say we because I'm on the team. Who would have thought? The Braves have been playing a lot more difficult opponents. They got swept by the Dodgers at one point. I think they might not have gotten swept, but I think they lost series to the Padres. The Braves are playing well. They're the Braves. I would never say the Braves are going to be bad. But the Phillies have just been on a tear this year. You have 2 of the top 3 Cy Young favorites right now, and Zach Wheeler, and not Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, the 9-0 man with a 1.44 or something like that or so. Both Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez have been phenomenal this year. Ranger's been on a tear this year. Between him and Shota Imanaga, I wonder if one of them is going to be able to beat Zach Wheeler for the Cy Young if all things continue how they are. It's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. And the rest of the lineup for the Phillies has been phenomenal. Alec Bohm looks like a top 5 third baseman. Bryson Stott's solidifying himself as a top 7 second baseman. Bryce Harper is Bryce Harper. And Trey Turner's been out for about 3 weeks or so now. So the Phillies have been cruising without Trey Turner for nearly a month at this point. You have Brandon Marsh stepping up. Johan Ramos is hitting 300 after disappointing playoffs. Castellanos is And Kyle Schwarber is Kyle Schwarber, so he's going to sit up there, he's going to walk, and he's going to hit bombs. So the lineup's been fantastic for the Phillies. The rotation's been phenomenal. It's top 3 in baseball right now, especially in team ERA. And the bullpen, even though it's the Phillies bullpen, they've been pretty damn good all year. Half the time, we don't really need the bullpen to do all that much because we just put up all their runs. I know the Rangers have started slow, but we just swept the Rangers, we swept the Padres. When we played the Blue Jays, Jose Barrios was the ERA leader and put 8 on him in like 3.1 innings or something. So no matter who we face, the Phillies come up strong, swinging the bat, and ball go boom. The Marlins are really bad, and we know this. And then the Nationals are not that bad. I think C.J. Abrams looks really good. I mentioned the Mets, so I don't really care. But you were really right on the Marlins. I will give you props for that one. They have been really bad. Sandy Alcantara, Yuri Perez, both injured. The bats are barely bad. But I do like the Nationals coming out. They're just shy of 500. So I like what the Nationals are doing. They're doing well. But we're the Phillies.
Okay, so with that, we will move over to the NBA playoffs. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the offseason as well. So as it stands when we are recording this, the Celtics lead the Pacers 2-0 in the Eastern Conference Finals, while the Mavericks lead Minnesota 1-0 in the Western Conference Finals. And I want to say this before I go any farther. Going into these 2 series, I did predict Dallas and Boston to make the finals. So I would say up to this point, that prediction is aging well. And overall, my NBA playoff predictions as a whole have aged extremely well. The only big misses I have was Denver making the finals, which was pretty chalky, and then Indiana making the conference finals, which again, nobody really could have seen coming. But other than that, I think I've got pretty much every other series not involving Denver or Indiana correct. So we'll see if that ends up continuing. I think with Boston and Indiana, it's pretty straightforward. The Celtics are a lot better than the Pacers. I give Indiana a ton of credit for making this run. But the interesting series right now is the one in the West with Minnesota and Dallas. And the reason why I like Dallas over Minnesota going forward is because of the amount of firepower Dallas brings to the table while holding a steady and balanced roster. Minnesota does have arguably the best defense in the NBA. Anthony Edwards is an extremely underrated defender. Jaden McDaniels is obviously great on that end of the floor. Rudy Gobert now has 4 Defensive Player of the Years, but it's really hard to be able to manage the combination of both Luka and Kyrie, because it only really takes one of those guys to get hot for things to really change for the Dallas offense. And they've done a really good job building around those guys by adding guys who can shoot the ball and guys who can run the rim and can be threats on the pick and roll as guys who can be lob threats. And those players are also really good defensively. The rim protection from guys like Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford has been really effective for them on that end of the floor, while Kyrie and Luka have been playing some of the best defense of their careers. So that's why ultimately I like Dallas ahead of Minnesota. And I still think Boston is the team to beat in the finals. I picked them to win the championship at the start of the year. I picked them to win it at the start of the playoffs. That has not changed. I still have them taking it all the way.
Before these series started, I also had picks. I had the Mavericks in 7, and I had the Celtics in 5. And that looks pretty damn well so far. It's the same as you, so I'm not going to expand too much. But with the Mavericks, they played the Wolves 4 times this past year. But Kyrie was only there for 1 game, the one that they won. Luka, I think, only played in 2 of them, as well as the one that the Mavericks won in. And I believe in all 4 of those games was before the trade deadline. So no PJ Washington and no Daniel Gafford, which is something that I think is really big. I think the additions of Gafford and PJ Washington between this matchup is going to be phenomenal. I think Kyrie is just a different type of player to Jamal Murray, and it will be a lot harder for Jaden McDaniels to guard. He's going to be the man on Kyrie during the series. And the Mavericks have this guy, his name is Luka Doncic, and he's kind of insane. And while everyone's kind of looking at Anthony Edwards as this man and throughout the playoffs who's been insane, Luka has been ridiculous so far. He kind of carried the Clippers series, and they just upset the 1-seed Thunder in 6. They didn't even take them 7. And although the Wolves have some of the best defense in the league, I think Luka might be a bit too much for them. We saw it the other night when they won, and I know it was a little bit of mismanaging from the Wolves, but I think the Mavs came through, showed that they're here for a reason, and that they can win this series. And if they get to the Celtics, I think there's a world where they do beat the Celtics. I'll be chalky and I'll say Celtics in 6 if it's the Mavs. If it's the T-Wolves, I think it might be a different story just because of the defense. But I think with the Nuggets now out, I think it's going to end up being a chalky road to where we have a Celtics winner championship.
And as we look into the offseason, I think there's a few really interesting teams who could possibly make some big splashes. I'd be surprised if we get any crazy draft night trades, mostly because of the lack of high-end talent at the top of the class. But as we go past the draft and look at free agency and beyond, there are a few teams who appear to be contenders, kind of, but they're also stuck in limbo. And the question is, should they blow it up? Mostly referring to the Suns, the Clippers, or the 76ers. And I hold very firmly that I'm not sure if any of these teams should look to blow it up. I think the one team you can really make an argument for is Phoenix because, well, they were a disaster in the playoffs, and it's pretty clear that this core with this roster construction really isn't going to get it done. But what choice do the Suns really have? Kevin Durant's value is the lowest it's ever been, and sure, it's still Kevin Durant. You'd still get a nice haul for him. He did make the All-NBA, I think it was the second team, might have been the third team. Regardless, it's Kevin Durant. He's really good, but I don't think his value is appropriate to where it should be. And with Devin Booker as well, sure, you can get a lot for him, but are the Suns really going to trade these 2 superstars away after just 14 months of it not working? I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to continue to try to build around these guys, try to find the right role players. I'm just not sure if these two with Bradley Beal can really coexist. I think the more likely teams to blow it up, but also really shouldn't, are the Clippers and the 76ers, especially the Clippers with the impending free agency of Paul George. Now, the biggest reason why I don't think the Clippers should blow it up is because the Clippers are getting a new arena, they are moving away from the Lakers, and I think their team is good enough. It's always been just about health with them. And they've really never been healthy with this core of Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. But when they were healthy, throughout the first 50 games of the regular season, they were just as good as Minnesota and Denver and Oklahoma City in the West. Remember, it was a four-way race for that number one spot before the Clippers started to deteriorate and they fell apart from those top three. So it's obviously a big gamble to ask Clippers to be healthy for a playoff run because they haven't been. But really, what choice do they have? I believe they should re-sign Paul George, even if it's an overpay. What other route is there for them to really go? And then as we look at the Sixers, I think they're in the most fascinating spot because I think they have the most flexibility of the group. They only have, I think, 2 players under contract next year. Now, surely Tyrese Maxey will be back, so they're going to have Embiid, Maxey, and an entirely open slate. This gives them a max contract slot to get a guy like a Paul George, or maybe swing a little bit less for a guy like DeMar DeRozan. But nonetheless, I don't think now is the time to trade Joel Embiid because I think they can still build around him, and I think Joel Embiid is good enough to lead a team on a deep playoff run. It's just been bad luck and bad timely performances from him and others over the last few years that have prevented that. But I think Joel Embiid gets a bad rap, and it's really not entirely his fault. And especially with another year of development for Tyrese Maxey and another possibly third scorer for them like Paul George and DeMar DeRozan. And if they fill out the rest of this roster, I think this team could be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the East. The one argument for them blowing it up is that Joel Embiid's value will probably never be higher. He has been unbelievable over the last 2 to 3 years. And with his age, he's 30 now, with his injury history, it's hard to imagine he's going to continue to get better as he has over the last couple of years. And a decline feels kind of inevitable, at least within the next 3 to 4 seasons. So that's the one argument you can make for them to blow it up and restart. But given where the Sixers are, I'm not entirely sure they could do that because I think they could be one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the Eastern Conference next year and finally put themselves in a position to compete with other teams like Boston and have the Joel Embiid playoff run that they've been waiting for so long.
Between these 3 teams, I think the most likely to blow it up would be the Clippers. And the main reason is just because of Paul George's looming free agency. And if Paul George ends up leaving, you're not able to give him the extension. You have Kawhi, who's probably been the most injury prone out of the entire group. James Harden is a free agent. I think Russ is also a free agent. So it seems like that group might be slowly starting to deteriorate. But I do think they should re-sign Paul George. I think keeping George and Kawhi together is a really good move. And I think the 2 of them can stay healthy. They could go on a pretty good run. They're able to win a game or 2, I believe, against the Mavs without the need of Kawhi. So I think if you get a healthy Kawhi, they probably would have won that series. Kawhi played in a game or 2, but it's because he was half injured. So he wasn't able to be fully there, and they ended up losing the series. But if you get a healthy Kawhi play defense, you get Paul George, you get a little bit better of a bench, this could be a top 3 seed in the West. So I think most likely they should keep what they're doing. I think the Suns should at the very least keep both KD and Booker. I think the main issue is having spent all that much for Bradley Beal. You traded a lot of your depth to go get KD, but I think the big thing is if you can use money and build a better, more so depth and bench pieces around Booker and KD, kind of similar to what the Nuggets have been doing. You have Jamal Murray, you have Jokic. Build the best role players, build the best bench players and role players that you can for them, and see what you can get out of that. Because KD, at however old he is now, is still pretty damn good. And Devin Booker is still on the verge of being the best shooting guard in the NBA. So you can get a lot out of these guys. As a Sixers fan, I don't want us to trade Joel Embiid because I think he's too good. And while his ceiling is probably never going to be higher, he just won an MVP last year, and he probably would have won it if he didn't get hurt. But he's still going to be fantastic. We're more than likely to re-sign Tyrese Maxey, but I think being able to get a better bench, similar to what, like I mentioned with the Nuggets, getting a better bench, maybe go out and get a smaller guy like DeMar DeRozan to play the 3. That could be a really good starting main 3. Get 2 more guys to kind of play the 2, play the 4, and then just kind of roll with a better bench, use all the money in the spots that we have on the roster, build the best bench that we can. And with how weak of East it was this year, the Sixers could easily be a top 3 seed. I mean, this past year, they were the 7th seed, and we're only 3 games behind the 2 seed, and that's with Joel Embiid missing half of the year. So if we had to have the Joel Embiid, we're the 2 seed. Problem solved. So have the Joel Embiid, build a better bench, call it a day. That's all I really asked for. Paul George would be cool as hell to have on the team. Be awesome, but I don't think we really need him. And if there was a team to make a big trade, it's probably going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. Between maybe Darius Garland ends up leaving. If you want to stick with Garland and bet on his upside, where does Donovan Mitchell go? And do they want to trade Evan Mobley, who had a slightly down year this year after looking like a really good power forward? We'll just have to wait and see, because I think the Cavaliers' future is a really interesting part of the storyline going into the offseason. They have these big main 3 pieces. Who are they trading? Is Darius Garland going to go to the Pelicans? Are they going to be able to get a guy like Brandon Ingram back? I don't know. Do you want to trade Donovan Mitchell somewhere? Maybe he goes to the Spurs. You get some of their young players, get some of their assets, and they want to go out and win some pieces. The Knicks are a team who's looking like they want to go out and get a star. Do you trade him? Donovan Mitchell has said in the past he wants to play for the Knicks. Do you trade Mitchell to the Knicks and you try and get assets from them? There's always the Thunder. Do they want to trade all their picks and try and go get a guy like Evan Mobley to play down with Chet and have one of the better front courts in the NBA? There's a lot of different ways that the Cavs can go with one of the 3 that they might trade. And I think that's going to be very interesting to see. And if they keep all 3, which I think is very not likely, I think if they keep Mitchell, I think Garland's gone. And if you keep Garland, I think Mitchell's gone. It's one of the 2. I think Mobley is almost definitely staying. But I think one of the 2 backcourt guys are definitely gone by the start of next season.
Yeah, before we move on, I'll touch on the Cavs here as well. And I think they probably should blow it up. They're in an interesting spot because, as you said, they have their core 3, arguably core 4 if you throw Jarrett Allen in there. And they probably should shuffle the deck. So we'll start with the variable of Donovan Mitchell. Will he want to stay or will he want to go? Everything I'm about to say is contingent on him staying, which has to be priority number 1 for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's the best player on the team. He is a legitimate playoff riser. He's made it to the postseason every year of his career, and although his team has never gotten out of the second round, it's because he's never been with a truly elite contender. He's had some good teams in Utah and now here in Cleveland, but they've never been good enough. They weren't good enough to beat Boston, even if Donovan Mitchell was healthy. But I think keeping him absolutely should be the priority if that's possible. And the other guy they should look to keep is Evan Mobley. Mobley has had his ups and downs, but he's a really good young player. He's already one of the better defenders in the league. And I think his offense will get better. Maybe not to the level we would have hoped for, say, 2 years ago, but it still should be quite good. The other 2 guys, Garland and Allen, I think they should look to ship off. And I think they can get some good assets for these guys. Jarrett Allen is a good player. He made the All-Star game a few years ago. He's younger than people think. He's a quality big who I think can get you a pretty nice return. As for Darius Garland, you mentioned the Pelicans and the Spurs. I think both of those teams make a lot of sense, and I think they have assets that would make sense in return for Cleveland. If you trade Garland to the Spurs, you'd probably get some combination of the Spurs draft picks. They have 4 and 8 in the first round. I don't think both of those picks would be in the deal, but definitely one of them, along with maybe some other picks, maybe another young player, a guy like Keldon Johnson, per se, to match the salaries. And then with New Orleans, Brandon Ingram could work. Ideally, if I'm Cleveland, I would try to talk them in to giving me one, or God forbid both, of Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. That doesn't feel overly likely because I think those 2 guys are really good, and I imagine New Orleans values them over Brandon Ingram, and they should value them over Brandon Ingram. So I feel like a Garland-BI swap probably makes more sense, and I actually really like that deal a lot for both sides. I think Cleveland would probably get back a little bit more because you're going to have to extend Brandon Ingram, and I think Garland's probably the better asset of the 2. But the framework and idea of that I feel like could make a lot of sense. A Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Brandon Ingram, and whatever you get for Jarrett Allen core with their new coach, I think this could be something. But again, you have to convince Donovan Mitchell to stay. I think it's probably 50-50 that they can do it. If they don't do it, then, well, they're in trouble. Because I think Donovan Mitchell is a fringe top 10 player in the NBA. So with that, we're going to move to our fun and game segment. We're going to do something a little bit different, and I'm excited to introduce it to everyone. So I imagine you all have seen those graphics on the internet where you have $15 to buy a team, essentially. And that's what we're going to do here today, but we're going to do it with a little bit of a twist. So before we start, we're going to each pick one player per graphic for the other person to where they have to build around. So for example, in the NFL graphic, I may say you have to build around this player, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'll go first. We'll start with the NFL graphic. And I'm going to say you need to build around, let's do Caleb Williams for $3.
Okay, so this is flag football.
But do it as like a real, I know it says flag football, but view it as like a real NFL offense.
Real NFL? Okay, alright. Well, I was going to go all speed. Alright, so running back isn't all that crazy. I think Mostert for 3 is probably a bit too much. McCaffrey's easily the best running back in the NFL, but you can make it work with other guys. So I'm probably going to go with Kyron Williams for 2 because he was an All-Pro, and for $2, that's pretty damn cheap. For 2 receivers, there's not a lot of like value here. Jacoby Myers at 2 isn't that crazy. Pickens to Flowers at 3 makes sense. I'd like to get a top receiver. Laporta for 3 is a pretty good value. Definitely not going deep over 4. That's too much. So 3, 4, 5. I can go AJ Brown for 4, which would put me at 9. And then that's another $6 I can go with. And I can go Pickens and Laporta. Yeah, I can probably just go Caleb Williams, Kyron Williams, AJ Brown, George Pickens, Sam Lagoda. Yeah, I'm gonna work with that. I like that a lot. AJ Brown for more deep balls, physical threat, Pickens for his speed, and Laporta for all reliable, and Kyron Williams down deep. That's what I'm gonna roll with.
Okay, I mess with that. So which NFL player will I have to build around?
I could just give you Sam Lagoda for fun, but I think what I'm going to do is you're going to build around a quarterback, Mr. $3 Jordan Love.
Okay, so I have $12 to spend on the rest of these players. We'll start at running back. The one that really pops out to me instantly is Jaylen Warren because I think the gap between him for $2 and A.J. Dillon for $1 is really big. And I don't think he's like drastically worse than like Kenneth Walker or even Saquon Barkley. So I think Jaylen Warren for $2 would make a lot of sense. So with that, I have $10 to spend on the rest. And I think I would rather spend big money on a guy like Justin Jefferson because even $5 for a player of his caliber seems cheap. So with my remaining $5, I'm intrigued by Sam Laporta for $4. I think the other tight ends lower than him are pretty good value, but I'm biased, so I'm going to pick Sam Laporta for $4, and then with my last dollar between Josh Reynolds and Gabe Davis, I think Josh Reynolds is the better of the two. So Jordan Love with Jaylen Warren as his backfield mate, Justin Jefferson and Josh Reynolds on the outside, and then Sam Laporta at tight end. That seems kind of filthy.
I like that one a lot. Sam Lagoda for both teams. We are rocking.
Okay, so now for your NBA team, it's pretty much an all-star lineup here, essentially. So
okay.
I kind of have a double challenge. So you're going to have to build around Joel Embiid for $4, but to build around the team with the idea that you have to beat the 2017 Golden State Warriors.
Awesome. All right, well, okay. So I'm assuming if I take, say, LeBron, that's current day LeBron, right?
Yes, this is
all right.
They played like how they are right now against the 2017 Warriors.
Gotcha. All right, so I need perimeter defense drastically, and there's not a lot of guys that are like ridiculous for perimeter defense, which is what I'm a little worried about. But I think getting just as much defense as possible with like shooters around. So I think with Embiid, you could go with a guy like Anthony Davis just for the defense. But my thought is right now, if you have Giannis against that 2017 Warriors, I don't know who's going to be able to stop them because they ran a little more small ball almost, and I feel like Giannis just kind of bullies them and would just drive straight through. And between the defense of Giannis and just the shooting of Joel Embiid, I think that's just filthy. So I'm gonna roll with Giannis and Embiid. Spend $9. I have $6 left. I think I'm gonna take LeBron for 2, even though he's third, almost 40. He's still LeBron. He's still really good. I think his passing is gonna be great with Embiid and Giannis. And I think I do want some sort of shooting. So that's what, 9, 10, that's 11. I have $4 left. So the most I can get is a $3 player. I could go Booker, then Fox. I can go Damon Brown. I could get Mitchell and Tyrese Halliburton. I kind of like that because Halliburton's passing is crazy. I kind of like that actually. You know what? I'm going to roll with that. I'm going to roll Tyrese Halliburton, Donovan Mitchell at the 2, Bron at the 3, Giannis at the 4, and then Embiid at the 5. I think bully ball from Giannis, defense from Giannis, and then having the passing from Bron, Halliburton, and then just the shooting from Mitchell and Bron, as well as just prime Embiid. This is 38 a game for Embiid. I think that could be lethal. I think in real life, like currently, that's insane. But I think against the Warriors, that could be really well. It'd be close.
Yeah, I like this team's combination of playmaking and then all the size they're going to have down low. I think that would give the Warriors some trouble. All right, who am I going to have to build around here?
All right, there's a couple different things I could give you for the NBA, but I think for the most fun, I think building around Victor Wembanyama is fun.
Okay, so with Wembanyama for $4, I think the first thing we need to do is get him a really good lead guard, somebody who can be a pick-and-roll guy for him, somebody who's a great passer. So I'm willing to spend extra money, $4 or $5. I think for right now, I like the idea of spending big on Luka Doncic. We'll come back to this one if I don't have enough money and I may have to fall for Jalen Brunson. But Luka for $5 might be worth it. At the 2, I think I'm going to cheat a little bit. Derek White for $1 seems like an absolute steal. I would pick him over pretty much anybody in the $2 row. So the idea of having Derek White at the 2 and then Luka at the 1, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. So with $5 left, the question is, can I get a combination that I really like, or do I want to go down from Luka to Jalen Brunson? Because I think the idea of Brunson, White, and then say Paul George and Julius Randle, I think could be pretty fun. But also having like a twin towers of Victor Wembanyama and Evan Mobley in the front court, like who is scoring off of that? So I think I actually want to go with this. I think I want Wembanyama and Mobley in the front court. Nobody scoring in the paint. I think I'm going to roll with Luka. Derek White helps with the perimeter defense. And then I think I have $2 left. Put Michael Porter Jr. in the corner and let him shoot threes. He's the perfect 5th guy for this team. Luka commands the offense. Victor Wembanyama, also a big hub of the offense. And then you have 3 elite defenders. And Michael Porter Jr. is no slouch on that end of the floor either. So I think I'm going to roll with that.
Yeah, I think Victor and Evan Mobley on one team is just ridiculous. And that's almost exactly what I would have done. I would have definitely gotten Mobley and Wemby together just for their defense.
Okay, so let's move over to the MLB. We did ours a little bit differently. Mine for you is that you have to build pretty much the perfect rotation with all of these guys in their prime. I feel like the easy way out is to get all the guys in the $3 row for the most part, or some combination of that. So because of that, I'm going to make you spend $5 to start on Randy Johnson.
Okay, I was thinking of spending $5 anyways. I wanted Pedro because he's my GOAT, but I'm cool with Randy anyways. He's insane. Now the question is, who else do we get? I think I'm looking at the fours right now. Bumgarner at 4 is kind of a little crazy. Now he was great, but he was a playoff guy. He wasn't like a insane guy like throughout his career. But I think getting another 4 could be really good. If we're talking prime, I'm instantly gonna grab Tim Lincecum, who's 2-time Cy Young winner. So I will take that immediately. R.A. Dickey has a Cy Young, and I think the knuckleball could be crazy, but I'm not confident in that. I also think Mark Bueller could be a really good like fourth starter in terms of like best rotations ever, because he's just Mr. Consistent. He didn't really win a lot, all that much, but he was just the guy who came in, had a 3.5 ERA, and just called it a day. So I'm gonna roll with Randy Johnson for 5, and then Lincecum and Buehler for 4 to combine. That's 9. So I have another $6. So I could get a 4 and just get another 2. Like I could get Corey Kluber, former Cy Young. I could get Cliff Lee, who was really good. I think getting one of the 4s was really good, but I think the question is who. I could go Santana. I could go Felix. I like Felix a lot, but he fell off towards the end. But I know it's prime. And then Roy Halladay was just ridiculous. Roy Halladay was Mr. I'm gonna throw 240 innings. You're gonna deal with it. You know, I'm gonna roll with this. I'm gonna Randy Johnson as the ace. I'm gonna have Halladay as the 2 guy. I'm gonna have Buehler as the 3, Lincecum as the 4, and then for the 5th one, I'm gonna roll with Cliff Lee. I think that's what I'm gonna roll with, and I think that's 3 lefties and 2 righties, if I remember correctly. So I think it's a good mix of guys who can throw left and righty. We have the hurler of Randy Johnson, the pitching mechanics of Halladay, our short king and Lincecum, consistency of Buehler, and then Cliff Lee is just Cliff Lee. I like that one a lot.
Okay, I dig it. I think Roy Halladay at $4 feels like the best value of that group. And shout out the GOAT, Tim Lincecum. Our king.
So, for the one I gave you, you're going to have $18 to not just build the best infield that you can, but get your ace of the future. And for $18, I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about this. And I think if you're going to build around anyone, you need an MVP caliber player. And I think that guy is Bobby Witt Jr.
Okay, so I only have $12 to spend on these last 5 players. I will say Bobby Witt Jr. is definitely the best position player on this list. So if I were to spend $6, he is probably the way to go. So in terms of value, the name who's sticking out to me, he is at shortstop, but he has experience at third. Elly De La Cruz at $3 feels foul. I feel like him and Bobby Witt on that side of the infield together, I know that's half of my budget, but I think I like the idea of that. At second base, I wouldn't mind spending big, but I saw Jordan Westburg's numbers the other day. He's having a really good year. I think for $2, I think that'd be a pretty good pick. And then now I sit at $7 left. I want to have a strong pitcher. I do really like William Contreras for $5, but then I'd have to go $1 the rest of the way, which I don't really want to do. I'd rather have a really strong pitcher, even if it's just Paul Skeens at $2. I think I might roll with Paul Skeens for 2. So we have Skeens, Westburg, that's 4. Elly is 7, and then Bobby Witt is 13. So I have $5 left for catcher and first base. Okay, so the real question is, do I want to spend bigger on somebody like Salvador Perez and Christian Walker and suffer to have a member of the Detroit Tigers offense on my roster? I don't think I'm going to do that. I think it would make more sense to get Bo Naylor for 2, and then your guy, Tristan Casas, at first base for 3. So we're going pretty much most of the 2s and 3s with Skeens, Naylor, Casas, Westburg, Elly, and then our big star, Bobby Witt Jr.
I think Tristan Casas for 3 is really underrated. He grossed in like 100 since last year. He's been ridiculous. I think looking at the pitchers, I think all of them are really good besides Jose Urquidy. He has like a 5 ERA. But I think everyone else in there is pretty much worth where their value is at. George Kirby is always going to be a Cy Young guy, and Joe Ryan's my guy, so I had to throw him in there somewhere.
All right, so that will wrap up the episode. Another fun one in the books. If you have any final words for everyone, let them out.
Not a lot, just ball go boom.
Ball go boom, folks. So the next episode should be up pretty soon. We apologize with the inconsistency, but we should have more time over the next few months to where episodes are going to be more consistent. And before you know it, we'll be previewing the upcoming NFL season. So that should be a lot of fun. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.